If you've been watching my channel for a while, then you know how I feel about performance when it comes to Hell Let Loose. I have had every performance issue you can think of in relation to PCs. While my journey into PCs started in 1990, in 2007 when I got my first laptop in preparation for digital DJing, I was met with a slew of issues pertaining to latency, and audio dropouts, and snap, crackles, and pops. This is the stuff that nightmares are made of, and makes people switch to Apple. A new PC that isn't capable of running modern software isn't acceptable, so it's up to us to figure these problems out and mitigate them as best as we can. One thing you learn very quickly is that a PC should be tuned for a specific task. For instance, my DJ laptop does not have any network drivers installed, as network drivers and live audio do not play well with each other. Another factor is core count, frequency of each core, and does that software utilize more than 2 cores. This is why a laptop with a 4-core CPU running at a boost of 3.0 GHz can have more audio issues than a dual-core CPU with a boost of 3.6 GHz, especially when the software you are using only uses 2 cores. Trying to figure out why some people have issues playing Hell Let Loose and why others can have a stutter-free experience is what forced me to go down this deep rabbit hole. And what hit me was a never-ending reminder of the day I figured out all of my audio issues back in 2008. The driver for the touchpad on my laptop would cause audible pops and clicks every time I just simply moved the mouse. When I connected a regular USB mouse, all of the issues went away. So this led me on a chase to find a different driver for the touchpad, which thankfully Alps provided on their website. Now, why did we have to hear about my shortcomings from 2008? Because it's the exact same path we are going to follow today to see if your PC may be the issue when playing Hell Let Loose. You may think, but my PC is perfect in every single way. Well, we're going to see. And by the end of this guide, you will have a path of steps you can take to make sure beyond a reasonable doubt that every stutter you have is game related and not your PC. If you haven't watched my other performance video, click the link in the description and do all those steps first. At a minimum, you must put your GPU into MSI mode before assigning the Interrupt-Affinity to the GPU. If you found this video helpful, consider hitting that subscribe button. Here we go. We must start with unlocking a new power plan for Windows, called Ultimate Power Plan. To unlock the Ultimate Power Plan, open Command Prompt as administrator and copy and paste this from the description. Then, download Power Settings Explorer from the description below. Once opened, in the left pane, scroll down to Processor Power Management and uncheck these 3 entries: Processor Idle Demote Threshold, and Processor Idle Promote Threshold, and Processor Performance Time Check Interval. Hit Apply and close the software. Go to Start and type Power Options and hit Enter. On the right side of the window, click Additional Power Settings. Select Ultimate Performance and then click Change Plan Settings. Click Change Advanced Power Settings. Click the plus to drop down the Processor Power Management menu. You should now see the 3 items we unchecked while using Power Settings Explorer, called Processor Idle Demote Threshold, Processor Idle Promote Threshold, and Processor Performance Time Check Interval. Turn both Demote Threshold and Promote Threshold to 100%, and then change the Processor Performance Time Check Interval from 15 milliseconds to 5,000 milliseconds. This is how often Windows is checking to see if it needs to change power saving states. Power saving settings are bad for latency, and this one setting will reduce your latency considerably. You can skip this step if you want to, but I recommend doing this first, or you will have to reset your affinity settings for your GPU if you reinstall your GPU driver at any point. What we're going to be doing here is installing an NVIDIA GPU driver that only has the essentials in order to reduce GPU latency as much as possible. You'll notice that I am using an older driver. Pick any one you wish, and if you're not sure, just use the newest one. I am using an older driver, as NVIDIA references this driver as having the lowest latency. You can also download the driver you want to modify directly from NVIDIA and enter it in the Use Driver Files on disk, or manually select a driver version by selecting one in the drop-down menu. Click Next when you're ready to continue. When selecting components to install, we only need the basics: And as you can tell, there is a ton of stuff running in the background on a regular GPU driver install. We will check the boxes for display driver, which is required, PhysX, and Microsoft Visual C 2017 runtimes. If you like audio coming out of your monitors, or are utilizing the USB-C port on your GPU, then check the box for HD audio via HDMI or USB-C driver. If you use Shadowplay or anything else in the list, then now is the time to select it. I do not use that as an audio source or anything else in the list, so I will leave them blank. One of my issues was NV container causing high DPC latency, so I definitely want to leave this one unchecked. Hit next to continue. Once it's done building the package, there is more options to select. Check the boxes for disable installer telemetry and advertising, perform a clean install, disable multiplane overlay, and disable Ansel. Click next to continue. You can either build package and install at any point later in the future, or click install to start the installer, which is what I recommend. Go through the prompts as if it's a normal NVIDIA install and restart the PC afterwards. You'll have to reinstall any monitor drivers that you might have had and double check your display settings and advanced display settings to make sure your refresh rate is set to its highest. Next, we will be downloading a piece of software I had tried to forget about, called LatencyMon. Download from the link in the description. We will be running this software from a fresh reboot with as many programs closed as possible. This includes any RGB software, as this software does cause a ton of latency and could be the source of many of your stutters. I would recommend only using RGB software when you're not gaming. I know, it sucks. Once running, just leave the PC without touching the mouse for at least a minute, or until you see Latency Monitor tell you there is something wrong with your PC. Latency Monitor is great at telling you what system file is causing the issue, but it does not tell you what processes are interacting with that system process. Some common system files that are causing latency are ndis.sys, tcp/ip.sys, ohci1394.sys, usbport.sys, usbxhci.sys, which is your USB 3.0 hub, nvlddmkm.sys, acpi.sys, and wdf01000.sys. If your latency monitor is showing an unacceptable amount of latency, then this is the reason you are experiencing stutters and other issues in Hell Let Loose, and possibly other games. Hell Let Loose will still have the origin rebasing issue and several other server-related issues after these fixes, but you will experience much smoother gameplay. Latency Monitor will show a couple of different system files that are causing an issue, but in my situation, it was showing ndis.sys. This system file is in reference to a network driver. In reference to my old laptop with the Alps touchpad driver issue, I decided to search the web and found my network driver on the Intel website instead of searching my motherboard's website for a driver. This was the first step into reducing latency, and I suggest you do the same as a first test of sorts. Then rerun Latency Monitor and check for improvements. Next, we are going to be disabling some power saving features that should also help reduce latency. If you experience any negative effects, then feel free to reverse them with the scripts in the description. Dynamic ticks are a feature that lets Windows stop the system timer when nothing is happening in order to conserve power. This is great for laptops, but can be a problem for desktops, especially when gaming. useplatformclock disables TSC and uses the platform source clock instead, HPET or PMT. PMT is used when HPET is disabled in BIOS. If you've watched my other performance video, then you will have already disabled HPET or High Precision Event Timer in Device Manager. useplatformtick disables TSC tick and uses the platform source tick instead, RTC. Open Windows PowerShell as administrator and enter these by copying each entry from the description below. Enter them individually and press enter after each one. To undo these changes, enter the following commands. Next, we will download a tool called Auto GPU Affinity. We will be running this tool 3 times to determine our best performing core for GPU performance. Once we have determined our best core, we will be assigning our GPU affinity to that core. Right-click the file and run as administrator and press enter to start the test. Take note of the best scores and pay attention to the best average FPS, the 1% and 0.01% lows. This will help us determine the best core of your CPU. Be aware that it might show you a hyper-threaded core is the best. We will take that info and also use the core listed above it. So we will have one core and one hyper-threaded core to set our GPU affinity on. Again, if your CPU is not hyper-threaded, then you will just use one core. Next, download the Interrupt-Affinity policy configuration tool, description below. Open the version pertaining to your Windows install as an administrator. Mine is 64-bit, so I'll open that one. Right-click and open as administrator. We will be using this to assign our peripherals to a specific core of your CPU. We will be assigning the GPU to use a specific core, and for that, your GPU must be in MSI mode. Watch my previous performance video for further details, link below. Next, open up Task Manager by hitting Ctrl-Shift-Escape. Click the Performance tab and select CPU. We will be using Task Manager to see which CPU core is the least active and assign our GPU to that core. Pick a core that has the least amount of utilization. Hold your mouse over the graph to see what core you are looking at. I am using CPU 12. If you have a CPU without hyperthreading, such as a Ryzen 3500 with 6 cores and 6 threads, then you can select any core you wish. If you are using a CPU with hyperthreading, such as a Ryzen 3600 with 6 cores and 12 threads, then you must pick even number cores, as the odd numbers are hyperthreaded cores. CPU 0 is core 1, CPU 1 is hyperthreaded, CPU 2 is core 2, CPU 3 is hyperthreaded, CPU 4 is core 3, and CPU 5 is hyperthreaded, and so on. Almost everything your PC does gets shoved onto CPU 0 or core 1, and we all know what happens when 20 people try to get out of a door at once. Someone will have to wait their turn, and we don't want your GPU, network card, mouse and keyboard, or your USB hub waiting in line, or else we get, you guessed it, latency. Find your GPU in the Affinity configuration tool. Mine is a 4080. Never mind the error that will pop up, we just need to highlight it and then select Set Mask. Select the CPU you wish to use based off of your Auto GPU Affinity tool findings. Select OK, then hit Yes to restart device. If you are using a hyperthreaded CPU, then select your core and the hyperthreaded core below it. My best core is core 12 and hyperthreaded core 13. If I want to further reduce the ndis.sys file from causing latency, I can assign my network card to a specific core. I will use CPU 10. Smaller devices do not need the addition of a hyperthreaded core, so just select a real CPU, not a hyperthreaded one. Additionally, if you are seeing latency spikes in Latency Monitor when you move your mouse or use your keyboard, you can also use this tool to assign the root hub where your mouse and keyboard or other USB devices are plugged into, and assign them to a specific core. This takes the weight off your main core, or CPU 0, but since that is a residual problem I am currently having, I will be showing that in a later section. Next, we will be downloading the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit from the description below. Inside the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit, we only need to install the Windows Performance Recorder and Windows Performance Analyzer. We will be using this software to figure out what process is causing all the trouble within our system. Since my Windows is up to date and my chipset driver is up to date, I am going to download the ADK for Windows 11 version 22H2, which also supports Windows 10 version 22H2. To do this, open the link below and download the SDK related to your version of Windows. The ADK for Windows 11 version 22H2 works for any Windows 10 version updated beyond version 2004. Once downloaded, install the software and continue through the prompts. Specify the location for the install, select No when it asks to send anonymous usage data, accept the license agreement, and check the box to install only the Windows Performance Toolkit. This will install to the Start menu, so you can now access it there. When using Latency Monitor, the system files it shows that are getting errors are usually not the root of the problem. some other process is overloading that system process, and by using this deployment kit, we can track down what's causing this. The software is complicated, but also feel free to explore and see just what your PC is doing in the background, and possibly mitigate some other issues further. I was over 800 microseconds, and at 1000 microseconds, Latency Monitor will tell you something is wrong. Rerunning Latency Monitor showed a system file called wdf01000.sys. This is a common one to pop up, and is a main system file that only gets installed with a fresh Windows install. So we cannot reinstall this file, and in reality, something is triggering this system file to cause dropouts. Using the Windows Performance Analyzer, we can figure out what process is making wdf01000.sys cause latency. Your problem with your PC will be relative to what Latency Monitor is showing, and while it may show the same system file issue, the cause is specific to your PC. Once we dial in the issue, the only stuttering you will get in Hell Let Loose and other games will be because of the game or the servers and not your PC. We are now set to get to the root of your latency issues. Go ahead and restart your PC and meet me back here to finish up this guide. Okay, now that we've restarted our PCs, we will open up Latency Monitor. Then open up Windows Performance Recorder. We want to click Start on Latency Monitor first, then hit Start in the Performance Recorder. When you see a spike, click Save in the Performance Recorder, then click Stop in Latency Monitor. It will save the recording in your Documents folder to analyze later if needed. Click Save to continue. Once saved, click Open in WPA, and the Performance Analyzer will open automatically. Click the drop-down box for computation, and drag the DPC/ISR graph to the right pane. Here we can see that I have the highest latency with my USB extensible host controller, and holding our mouse over the line in the graph tells us which process it is, usbxhci.sys. What we can do now is run the Affinity policy tool as an administrator and offload the usbxhci.sys. I would start with your network card and your GPU, then move on to your USB hubs. I don't recommend offloading any other devices unless they are causing an issue. Any of these settings can be reverted by deleting the mask. To make sure we know what device we are assigning, we can open up Device Manager, click View at the top, and select Devices by Connection. With this view, we can assign a single device or assign an entire hub. To make sure we know which device we are assigning the affinity to, right-click on any device and select Properties. I will use the PCI Express root port that holds all of my network drivers. Right-click and select Properties. Then click the Details tab, and in the drop-down box, select Physical Device Object Name. Take note of the address, PCI 0003. Now in the Interrupt-Affinity tool, find the PCI Express root port that corresponds to PCI 0003. Click Set Mask and select a non-active CPU. I will select CPU 6. When setting Interrupt-Affinity, some devices may restart without issue, and some need a restart of the PC to take effect. You can restart your PC now, or wait until you've assigned all the affinities. After restarting your PC, open up Latency Monitor and confirm your results. Ideally, we want below 200 microseconds, and if possible, we want below 100 microseconds. Anything under 1000 microseconds is acceptable though. Now, you should have a very good idea of what's causing the issue, and how to offload the interrupt affinity to a specific core to free up Core 0 or CPU 1. Remember that you can set entire hubs to a core, or set specific devices. Devices should be set individually, and USBs should be set as entire hubs. If your latency is stemming from, let's say, usbxhci.sys, this is referring to your USB 3.0, 3.1, or 3.2 hub. So moving this entire hub to a non-used CPU, in my case this would be CPU 10, it will offload the interrupt affinity from CPU 0 to CPU 10, helping lower latency and therefore stutters. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. It took me forever to make, a couple hundred hours of deep diving into this, and I really hope it helped you out. If you have any issues, let me know in the comments below. I'll try to help you the best I can. Every PC will be different and specific to your system. Thanks for watching and subscribing. See ya.